Discover the surprising truth. My son's incredible gift on Christmas changed everything forever. Steve stood in his dimly lit garage, surrounded by the familiar hum of tools and the sharp scent of grease. It was 3 days before Christmas, and the weight of financial strain pressed down on him like the hood of the car he was trying to repair. Business had taken a nosedive, and with every passing week, his hopes for maintaining the family garage flickered dimmer. He'd been a mechanic long enough to know that hard work and dedication weren't always enough to keep the lights on. The problem lay not in his skills but in the economy, and it gnawed at him like a rusted bolt that wouldn't budge. "Dad, can I talk to you?" Jake's voice was tentative, yet it stirred something in Steve's chest. Jake, just 17, had grown quieter lately, grappling with his own pressures. Steve's heart raced as he turned to face his son, wondering what burden he was about to hear. Would it be about school? A girl? Or had Jake somehow sensed the mounting unease between them? "I'm just worried," Jake said, shuffling his feet. "About the future, you know. The scholarships, they aren't really looking at me. They just see where we come from." The unspoken words between them were tender but sharp like an open wound. Every word hit Steve like a punch to the gut. He had always tried to instill values of perseverance and integrity, yet here was his son feeling judged not for his abilities but for their family's past. The pit in Steve's stomach widened. All he could envision was failure. Would Jake's determination crumble against prejudice? What had he done wrong? Every sacrifice made to instill moral craftsmanship now felt futile. He had worked tirelessly to set an example of loyalty, yet it seemed the world outside the garage door didn't care. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days zipped by, and Christmas loomed closer, Steve scoured the local garage sales for gifts, hoping for something that would light up Jake's eyes amidst the swirling stress. He stumbled upon a second-hand bike, rough around the edges but sturdy enough. It was a modest gift, but it represented hard work and a belief in family. In his heart, he thought, maybe if I show Jake what physical tenacity looks like, he would understand that nothing worthwhile comes easily. But that thought quickly soured. Would it be enough? He wrestled with emotions of inadequacy. What kind of father was he, offering a bicycle while Jake faced the potential of shattered dreams? The notion felt wrong, like sending him into battle armed with nothing but a rasp. Each night, the frustration simmered beneath the surface, clashing with pride. Jake deserved more, but could he provide it? The fragile piece of holiday preparation filled the house, paper crinkling underfoot, laughter oddly juxtaposed against Steve's growing anxiety. The guilt felt all-consuming, yet he couldn't voice it. On Christmas Eve, as they settled under the glowing tree, a storm loomed. Jake's heart-stopping surprise, a video project revealing a forgotten legacy, would unravel it all. The moment held promise but also dread. What if the truth only widened that chasm, pushing them further apart? Little did they know, Christmas was about to challenge everything they trusted. The air was thick with anticipation as Steve stared into the flickering glow of the Christmas tree lights, their soft twinkling barely illuminating the raw fear that gripped him. Jake shuffled nervously beside him, the video project he had hinted at just days prior weighing visibly on his shoulders like a heavy backpack. Steve's gut twisted as both excitement and a sense of dread clashed within him. He wanted to support Jake, but there were layers of unspoken burdens that felt as daunting as the threats looming over their family's future. "Are you ready?" Jake finally broke the awkward silence, his voice trembling slightly. Steve nodded, but his heart raced in rhythm with Jake's pulse, both sinking in an unspoken pact. He felt the divide between father and son tighten like an unyielding wrench, a gulf defined by worry, expectation, and the tightening grip of their economic reality. He had cultivated an image of what a father's role should entail, a fortress against the storm, a fountain of wisdom. Yet he felt unqualified, out of touch, and always uncertain about the right answers. Jake pressed play on the video, the screen blurred to life, revealing a montage of their family's history, snippets captured like fireflies in jars, moments of laughter, struggles, triumphs. But there, embedded among joyful memories, secret truths twinkled. Faces long forgotten flashed silently, bearing stories of resilience and grit woven into the fabric of their lineage. As the images played, Steve couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching a history book unravel, one he hadn't known he was part of. Old photographs from family reunions, glances shared between relatives steeped in emotion, moments he'd either pushed down or had simply forgotten due to the daily grind overwhelmed him. Each frame seemed to echo Jake's fears and aspirations, amplifying the weight on Steve's shoulders. Then came the voiceover, a shaky yet determined tone that belonged to Jake, layered over the pictures. I see myself in these faces. I see our struggles, our victories, and I know we're more than what other people project onto us. We might come from a rough start, but we have the strength to carve our own paths. I'm not afraid to face the future, Dad, because I know where I came from. The moment reverberated within Steve, igniting acknowledgement in his chest. While he had fought for every wrench's turn, every oil change, and every forgotten part, Jake was now turning the legacy on its head. It wasn't simply an inheritance of struggle, it was a challenge to rise above it. The concluding image, one of them together, arms slung around each other's shoulders from last summer's fishing trip, struck Steve deeper than any tool in his garage. The bond they shared was evident, rooted in moments that mattered. Yet, beneath that connection lay fears Steve had failed to convey. He felt his own son radiating hope even as he battled against self-doubt, and it stirred something profound. Jake, Steve began, but the words fell short, swirling like loose screws in his mind, obscured by the sudden clarity of his son's perspective. The light of understanding flickered like those lights on the tree, illuminating just enough to confront the questions rattling in his heart. When had his experiences overshadowed the lessons Jake had to learn? Could he embrace his own past differently so that it would not only inform but also empower his son? Determination sparked like a flame in Steve's chest as he realized that he had as much to learn from Jake as Jake had from him. Competing narratives began to merge, the fairly simplistic role as the provider took on a new dimension, transforming into a partnership, a chance to navigate the uncharted waters of anxiety and hope together. Let us work through it, he responded, finally finding the courage in his voice. Together. A silent agreement lingered like the fragrance of pine and cinnamon in the air as they shifted focus to face whatever lay ahead. The battle against not just economic hardship but the challenges of forging identity, legacy, and mutual trust began with them understanding each other more deeply than ever before. Another thought crossed Steve's mind, a lingering question that nudged at him like the cold wind outside the garage door. What if they weren't the only ones fighting these battles? As the heaviness of that realization settled in, Steve's eyes met Jake's, and a new resolve forged between them like molten steel ready to shape its future. Suddenly, the certainty of change animated through Steve. The next steps awaited them, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that they were due for a confrontation not just with their circumstances but with something bigger that loomed in the shadows of their shared history. Little did they know, the answers they sought were just beyond the horizon of their understanding. Perhaps they would still need to face the ghosts of the past, but this time, they would do so together. As the sparkle of the lights faded, a new day washed over the family, the glow of the morning sun creeping through the frost-kissed windows. Steve rose early, his mind buzzing with thoughts, a whirlwind of resolve and uncertainty. His newfound partnership with Jake had breathed life into the disbelief that had settled into his bones, but that spark came with questions demanding answers. He set about making breakfast, the rhythmic clatter of pans on the stove carving out a space for contemplation. The eggs crackled and sizzled, yet his thoughts wandered far beyond the kitchen. What had Jake meant when he spoke of carving their own paths? What if he too tapped into that strength from their lineage? His hands moved instinctively, but his heart was elsewhere, exploring unfamiliar territories within him. The lingering question remained, how could he transform the inertia that had long plagued him? Over the years, he had embraced the routines, the assembly line nature of his job, the predictability of life's demands. But today felt different. Today, he pondered a leap towards something more. The thought of his son's potential kicking in like a downshift from rest to acceleration filled him with both hope and trepidation. After breakfast, with plates neatly stacked in the sink and Jake engrossed in his own plans, Steve slipped outside. The winter air bit at his skin as he wrapped himself in his old, frayed coat, a silent reminder of days long gone. He wandered into the garage, an untouched universe of tools and untapped possibilities. There, among the clutter, he began to eye the old bike frame he'd promised himself he would fix one day, the rust and wear bearing witness to years of neglect. Suddenly, he felt a shift, a kernel of idea swirling around in his mind. Exhibiting his own creativity could very well resonate with Jake, create a ripple of involvement rather than just passive support. He recalled Jake's enthusiasm for film and storytelling, realizing that the skills he had honed in a different sphere could become a link to nurturing that passion. The car repairs he perfected, the technical knowledge he'd gathered, all served as a reflection of persistence. Perhaps there were stories hidden within those very experiences worth sharing, insights Jake could benefit from as both a creator and a learner. Driven, Steve grabbed the bike frame and began disassembling it with surprising agility. Each bolt that loosened felt like an opening to a more profound understanding both of himself and of the bond with Jake. The shadows that loomed over him began to recede, revealing the possibility of shared endeavors, a collaborative journey that extended beyond navigating their struggles. Could he foster his own talents while backing his son's passion? He paused momentarily, taking a deep breath, realizing that this could be their path forward, rebuilding not just a bike but their understanding of one another. A voice stirred through the air, cutting across his thoughts. "Dad? You okay?" It was Jake, standing near the entry to the garage, eyes wide with curiosity. Steve turned, the botched wool suddenly feeling less daunting. "Yeah, buddy. Just working on something." Jake cocked his head, sensing the shift in his father's demeanor. "Looks like you're ready to tackle the day," he remarked, stepping closer. Steve felt a swell of validation. In a way, Jake's recognition mirrored the acknowledgement he was coming to give himself. "How about we do something together?" he proposed, excitement dancing in his voice. "Maybe you can help me set this up for a video. We could document the process, or at least, I could narrate some of my experiences." Jake's eyes lit up, an affirmation Steve longed to witness. Yet, as they stood together amidst the scattered tools, an unvoiced tension lingered in the air, thick with the unknown. What stories would emerge from this collaboration? What challenges would they face together? As they began to strategize their project, Steve knew this was just the beginning. But a nagging doubt still clung to the edges of his thoughts. What obstacles might they encounter as they uncovered their truths? The journey ahead would demand more than just repairs, it would challenge the very foundation of who they were. "Let us figure it out," Jake said, thoughts whirring behind that eager smile. Steve nodded, the uncertainty of their path both exhilarating and terrifying, concluding with an echo resounding in his mind, a burgeoning realization: the time had come to face uncharted horizons. The morning unfolded with an electric anticipation as Steve and Jake wasted no time diving into their project. They scattered tools across the garage floor like a battlefield, each piece a potential weapon against the inertia that had long hindered their ambitions. Steve felt an invigorating mix of fear and excitement. They were not merely fixing a bike but embarking on a voyage to rediscover themselves and redefine their relationship. As they began, Jake's curiosity fueled the momentum. "Can we paint it a cool color afterward?" he asked, his voice bubbling with enthusiasm. Steve nodded, appreciating how Jake's creative spirit breathed life into the mundane task of repairs. Every twist of a wrench felt like a step forward, tangible proof of progress. The bike was emerging from hibernation, and in tandem, so were Steve's aspirations. Yet, in the midst of laughter and shared insights, a flicker of doubt smoldered within Steve. He recalled the weight of his past mistakes, the nagging question of whether he was truly capable of being a mentor to Jake. Shouldn't this project be more than just a facade? He couldn't shake the feeling that he faced both the joys and fears of unearthing his vulnerabilities. "Dad, what's the story behind this bike?" Jake's question was innocent, but it pierced through the haze of Steve's insecurities. The weight of that question hovered in the air, as he hesitated momentarily, thoughts collapsing around him. He had never consciously considered the bike's significance. It was supposed to be just a project, but the truth was more complicated. Huh. This bike? He started, voice steadying against the tide of old memories. It was mine when I was your age. I remember building it with my dad. The admission felt both liberating and frightening, a double-edged sword that could either strengthen their bond or leave him exposed. Jake's eyes widened with fascination. So, are we making new memories with it, then? His inquiry rang with innocent wisdom, cutting through Steve's fears like a knife. The realization struck him this was indeed about forging new stories, about shedding the layers of doubt that had accumulated over the years. Yes, Steve replied, more firmly this time. We are. The work continued, but Steve found himself contemplating the larger picture, the evolving dynamics of fatherhood and mentorship. Could he not only illustrate the mechanical intricacies of bike repair but also weave in the life lessons learned from struggles? Each turn of the wrench became a moment to reflect on the resilience he needed to foster within himself. Hours passed in laughter, camaraderie, and the clang of metal on metal, but with every moment of connection, Steve felt the gnawing undercurrent of his struggle for authenticity growing stronger. Would he falter when confronted with tougher topics? Would he know how to share more than just the operational details of this project? Could he navigate the emotional nuances while encouraging Jake to dream boldly? As the day drew to a close, they stood back to admire their work. The frame, stripped of rust, gleamed under the garage light. Not bad for our first attempt, huh? Jake beamed, patting the bike. Not bad at all, Steve echoed, pride welling within him. Yet, beneath the surface, the waves of uncertainty crashed. He realized that if he wanted their project to be an avenue for exploration, he would need to confront not only his failures but also his fears about being an absent figure in Jake's life. The real challenge lay ahead, an emotional adventure that would demand courage, honesty, and a willingness to reveal his flaws. As they lingered, a question swirled in Steve's mind. Would Jake find inspiration or disappointment in unraveling the complicated strands of their shared narrative? The weight of those unasked questions hung in the air, mingling with the scent of fresh paint they planned to use on the bike. We have so much more to do, Steve finally said, adventure mixing with the uncertainty in his voice. Yeah. Let us keep going. Jake replied, his enthusiasm unwavering. And in that moment, Steve understood the path forward wouldn't just require skill or diligence but a commitment to mutual discovery. As they turned to leave the garage, the looming question now shifting in his mind became clear. Would the unveiling of hidden truths bring them closer together, or might it risk unraveling the tenuous threads of their relationship? Each passing day seemed to ignite a deeper commitment within Steve. The bike project morphed from a mere activity into a transformative quest, a rebirth that beckoned him to confront the ghosts of his past. The vibrant colors Jake envisioned splashed around the garage, mixing with the grit of grease and fear that had lingered in his own heart. It was time to shake off the inertia and step into a nurturing role, both for his son and himself. With renewed determination, Steve took the lead. Let us work on the wheels today. I want you to learn how to adjust the brakes and align everything properly, he said, his voice brimming with authority mingled with warmth. Jake's eyes lit up. Okay. Can I do the brakes? Steve, caught off guard by his son's eagerness, hesitated briefly. Sure, but let us talk through it first. We want them to work perfectly, right? He felt an unexpected wave of pride as Jake nodded vigorously, illustrating the tangible connection forming between them. The earlier doubts slowly started to back away, replaced instead with anticipation of navigating these mechanical challenges together. As they worked, Steve recounted how he and his own father had embarked on similar projects. Each anecdote felt like a brick being laid towards a growing emotional foundation. I remember one time, he began, we miscalculated the brake alignment, and my dad had to help me fix it after I nearly crashed. He chuckled, finding solace in the shared experience. Jake laughed, but there was also something deeper in his eyes, a readiness to absorb these lessons not just in mechanics but in trust. What did you learn from that? He asked, catching Steve off guard once more. The question hung in the air, a moment of reckoning. Steve's answer could sharply define the trust they were weaving. I learned that mistakes can lead to improvements. It's okay to falter as long as you're willing to fix it. The boy worked on the brakes, focused and diligent. Moments later, he stepped back, a sense of accomplishment evident on his face. Can I test it out? His eyebrow arched hopefully, a mix of excitement and caution. Let us steady the bike first. Steve's mind raced, recognizing the gravity of the moment. What if Jake faced disappointment? What if the brakes failed? The stakes felt high. This was more than a bike test, it was a test of resilience, of their bond. Steve steadied himself beneath the weight of doubt but met his son's eager gaze. All right, but we'll take it slow. Let us make sure everything feels right first. He felt a tightening in his chest as he realized this was more about Jake's courage than technical precision. With a steady hand guiding him, they rolled the bike out of the garage, the sun spilling over the cold pavement. Jake climbed aboard, heart thumping like the pedals that needed to find their rhythm. Ready? He called, glancing back, yet his voice contained a brew of nervous jitters. Let us do it, Steve replied, momentarily glancing away to calm the rising tide of anxiety. As Jake started pedaling, a gentle breeze caressed their faces, yet Steve could scarcely breathe, caught between the thrill of success and the fear of failure. Each pedal stroke became a manifesto of their burgeoning transformation, vulnerabilities laid bare, but also shared victories in learning. As Jake gained momentum, the bike soared forward, laughter erupting from him and echoing into the quiet evening. But as Steve watched, a thought pierced through the haze of pride and dread. What if this moment was merely the beginning? What if this newfound connection brought forth deeper truths, ones that could shake the foundations of their relationship? The thing Steve didn't notice was the wrench still clutched against his chest, a reminder of the inner conflict fighting for space within him. As the ride continued, the laughter and exhilaration echoed, yet he knew they stood at a precipice of discussion about past regrets, failures, and the unsealed chapters of life he had yet to reveal. Dad? Jake's voice pulled him from his reverie, waiting expectantly for an answer to a question yet unasked. Steve realized that the time had come, a moment pregnant with potential revelation. Would he share his truth? Would doing so cement the bond, or fracture it irrevocably? Yeah, buddy. He replied, each word weighted with anticipation. And as he turned to meet his son's gaze, a cascade of possibilities unfurled before him, sparking a new crisis. Was he ready to embrace the uncomfortable truths he avoided for so long? Dad, Jake repeated, urging Steve to return to reality, a reality that felt heavy with expectancy and impending vulnerability. Steve took a deep breath, grounding himself amidst the overwhelming urge to shield his son from the unearthed shadows of his past. Yeah, buddy, he managed, but even he could hear the tremor in his voice. How could he voice thoughts cluttered with regret? Each shadow was a weight, dimming the glow of this joyous moment. Why did you stop riding with me? Do you still ride? Jake's innocent inquiry pulled at the brittle strings of Steve's heart. The questions shot through him like arrows. They struck right at the core of his unresolved grief and disappointment. His thoughts darkened. He had given up so many things after the accident. The bike had been a symbol of freedom, of shared laughter with his son. Yet here it was again, an unbroken cycle of his own avoidance. I guess Steve hesitated, the weight of his words pressing against his ribs. I got scared. When I fell, the bitterness tasted sour in his mouth. I wasn't ready to face the possibility of falling again. Jake's brow furrowed, but determination sparkled in his eyes. But you said it's okay to make mistakes if you learn from them. Silent moments stretched thin. Steve looked away, embarrassment creeping in. That's true, he acknowledged quietly, but it's easier to say than to do. Before he could articulate further, Jake's fingers curled around the grips nervously. Then let us face it together, Dad. I'm still learning how to ride. I'm scared too. A wave of understanding washed over Steve as he met Jake's gaze, insightful and resolute. Here was not just a son inviting his father, but a soul yearning for the duel against their fears, an invitation to share the depths of their insecurities. Let us ride some more then, Steve proposed, the notion of regaining control over something he had abandoned flickering to life within him. The connection they formed over those petals transcended beyond mechanics. It was the ignition of a journey he had avoided, one towards mutual vulnerability and authentic existence. As they circled the quiet street, heartbeats synchronized with the rhythmic whir of wheel spokes, Steve reached for deeper revelations. The bike felt unfamiliar, yet liberating. Each curve, each descent, sparked an internal awakening more intense than the physical act of riding itself. Jake shouted with glee as they raced down the sloping road. Laughter filled the space between them, carrying the weight of connected pasts and future struggles yet to be faced. Still, Steve couldn't shake the urgent feeling that he stood on the brink of an essential choice. The wind tousled their hair, laughter reverberated in his ears, yet beneath it lay an unyielding tension. Steve felt the forks of his reality converging, the choice between continuing to shelter his son from his own fears or unleashing a truth that could bridge the gaps that had laid dormant for too long. A rapid shift in direction threw Steve momentarily off balance, and he steadied himself with effort. Painful memories flashed across his mind, yet he pushed through, riding along with more vigor. What did it say about him, about their bond, if he couldn't confront his vulnerability? Jake! Steve finally shouted against the wind, breaking the momentum of the moment. Wait! Jake slowed, turning to look at him, wondering if he had done something wrong. The boy's face mirrored a mixture of trust and concern, urging Steve to clarify. I need to tell you something, son. About that time I was scared and stopped riding. Steve felt the gravitational shift within himself as anticipation built. The truth was knocking at the door of his soul, ready to break through and redefine the relationship he desperately wanted to heal. As he prepared for the revelation, a sense of energy crackled around them. This was not just about riding bikes, it was about sharing burdens. But as Steve opened his mouth, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed in their ears, and he turned to see a figure emerging from the shadows, a remnant of his past he hoped to leave behind. He stopped, breath caught, as uncertainty washed over him. Had the moment come for confrontation? Would the secrets he harbored finally unravel in the light of acknowledgement, or was he prepared for another painful confrontation? Was he ready to face the past lurking within him, all while holding on to the bond he was building with Jake? The footsteps grew louder, and with each echoing step, Steve's resolve trembled. The figure solidified into clarity, a man, aged and worn, reminding Steve of a time he had chosen to forget. The sight yanked the air from his lungs, shoving that previously simmering confrontation to the forefront. Steve, the man called, the voice gravelly yet layered in familiarity, a tone that hadn't echoed in years. You didn't think you could just ride away from me, did you? Jake, sensing the shift, looked between his father and the newcomer with innocent curiosity but growing unease. The boy's grip on the handlebars tightened, betraying his concern. Steve didn't respond, struck silent by the rush of anxiety now intertwining with his sense of duty. Who is that, Dad? Jake asked, his voice small but charged with the power of a child's trust. My old friend, Steve muttered, though the words felt hollow, almost disingenuous. He couldn't define what his relationship with this man had been, not now, not here. Friend? The man laughed, a harsh sound devoid of warmth. You mean, former friend. Remember when you ghosted us all, Steve? Left us behind like a worn-out tire? You've been riding away from the truth all this time. With those words, a wave of shame crashed over Steve. The past was never so neatly tucked away, no matter how fervently he had tried to bury it under layers of time and distraction. He had thought, with maturity and distance, he could outrun the shadows. Jake's eyes darted back and forth, searching for clarity in the chaos. Dad, is everything okay? The question hung in the air, forcing Steve to confront the storm brewing inside him. Was it truly okay? Yes, they had just begun to find their rhythm, yet this was a wound deeper than mere distance. It was a betrayal of self that now threatened the fragile redeveloping bond with Jake. I need to face this, Steve thought, grappling with the notion that perhaps Jake deserved the entirety of his truth, rather than half explanations and secrets. Who are you to come back here now? You think you can just drop back into my life? Steve's voice was raw, mingling anger with emerging clarity. "I came to help," the man replied, a shadow of his former self flickering with what could only be described as regret. "You may not think you can ride on your own, but I know what you're capable of. You need to stop running." And just like that, the fighting spirit in Steve rekindled. The essence of that fear suffocated him so many years ago was not solely linked to his fall, it extended into every facet of his life, defining who he was, and now, who he was attempting to rebuild himself into. "What about Jake?" Steve asserted, thrusting his chin toward his son. "I'm not running away anymore, not from myself or my son." The challenger wavered but then pressed on. "You think that's enough? One ride, one tea change what you've locked away. You can't shelter him from the man you've become. Too much silence will harden that bond, Steve." In that moment, a surge of urgency coursed through Steve. The pain, while potent, was familiar to him now. It was the compelling launchpad for clarity, a crossroads from which he could either spiral down or rise, carrying Jake along for the ride. "What do I have to do?" he demanded, the vulnerability veiled beneath layers of anger and sorrow uncoiling into the open air. The man smiled slightly, perhaps not out of malice but with the understanding of their shared history. "Start by being honest. With him. With yourself. Confront what comes next." Steve turned to Jake, who watched his father with unbroken trust and unyielding readiness, the beauty of their shared vulnerability forging invisible threads of connection stronger than any words could articulate. "Jake," he began, feeling the weight of his father's shadow dissipate gently amidst a brighter light, "let us talk about that fall and what it meant for both of us." This was the moment he hadn't been prepared for, the step into the unknown he had long avoided. But the truth had never felt so pressing. It had the power to turn fear into fortitude. As thoughts tumbled through Steve's mind, another question bubbled up, burning for release. Could he truly embrace his past while cultivating a future for Jake unlike the shadow of his own? The answer lay just beyond his fear, and now more than ever, he realized he had no choice but to confront what lay ahead, not just for himself, but for his son. Would facing the truth allow both him and Jake to soar together, or would the explosion of long-buried emotions tear them apart before they ever learned to ride freely? Steve paused, the weight of his own past wrapping around him like a thick fog. He looked down at Jake, whose eyes were wide with a mix of curiosity and concern. In that moment, Steve couldn't help but reflect on all the years he had spent running not just from external conflicts, but from the internal turmoil that had shaped him. The skeletons of his past loomed larger now than ever, casting long shadows over his relationship with Jake. "Dad?" Jake's voice pulled him back. "What happened?" The question felt like a knife, sharp and precise, pressing into Steve's guarded heart. He took a quick breath, his mind racing through memories of laughter intertwined with the echoes of abandonment. What could he say? How could he distill years of bitterness and regret into a conversation that wouldn't overwhelm this little boy who deserved clarity? "Sometimes, we fall, Jake," Steve finally said, choosing his words carefully. "And it's not just when we ride. It's something we all have to deal with, how we pick ourselves up afterward, how we learn from the fall." Jake nodded slowly, still trying to grasp the enormity of what was unfolding. "So, is that what happened to you?" "It's all part of the same journey," Steve said, his voice firm yet tremulous. "I got lost somewhere along the way and stopped being honest with the people who meant the most to me. You, especially. I need to fix that." Jake's brow furrowed. "But you're telling the truth now, right?" "Yes, I am," Steve affirmed, feeling a shift within himself, a small flame of bravery igniting. He was discovering that vulnerability could be a strength, that openness could bridge gaps that he thought were unfixable. The air thickened as he continued. "There was a time when I didn't just leave people behind. I left pieces of myself behind too. I forgot how to confront the truth about who I had become and how that affected you. But I want to change." A medley of emotions flittered across Jake's face as he processed his father's confession. "Does that mean you're not going away again?" Steve felt a swell of determination coursing through him. "No, Jake. I'm not going anywhere without you. We're in this together." The sincerity of his words felt like a liberating breath. It wasn't just about apologizing or attempting to heal, it was about rewriting the very narrative they had both endured. It was about confronting the painful truths of their past, yes, but it was also about forging a new path together, side by side. As he watched his son absorb these revelations, Steve realized this moment was pivotal, a catalyst for important conversations that lay ahead. He wasn't just rebuilding trust, he was redefining what it meant to be a father. Jake, still absorbing it all, looked contemplatively into his father's eyes. "What happens next, Dad?" A question echoed back to him, richer and more nuanced. "Next, we choose honesty. We face everything together. We find out what it means to actually ride through life without fear." In that moment, Steve caught the familiar figure lingering at the edges of his thoughts, the man who had confronted him earlier, challenging his notion of strength and self-reliance. Not just an antagonist from his past, but a reminder of the man he needed to face. As he contemplated the implications of their discussion, Steve became acutely aware of the emotional terrain that lay ahead. "I can't avoid this anymore. I need to confront him, to understand what he wants from me and, more importantly, from us." This revelation hung in the air, heavy with potential and dread, the certainty that some answers would not come easy. Still, uncertainty was part of growth, part of the journey ahead. With that in mind, Steve looked down at Jake, determined to steer his son toward a future untethered from the burdens of secrecy. "Are you ready for a ride, Jake?" Steve asked, trying to shift the atmosphere towards something lighter. "I'm always ready," Jake exclaimed, the vibrant gleam in his eyes brightening Steve's spirits. It felt as if they were already beginning to shift toward that future together, the promise of partnership rewriting their history into something hopeful. But as they started to walk away, a new thought consumed Steve. Was the man from his past truly finished with him, or would confronting his actions ignite a fire he wasn't prepared to withstand? That nagging worry loomed, a new chapter awaited, and the intersection of truth, legacy, and reconciliation hung precariously in the balance. Steve took a step forward, determined to shift the focus from their past to the possibilities ahead. The vibrant sun hung in the sky, casting a forgiving light over the world, yet the shadows of their earlier conversation remained, weaving through his thoughts. Jake's youthful energy was contagious, pulling Steve out of his spiraling introspection. "Let us go for that ride." Jake beamed, his enthusiasm a stark contrast to the heaviness Steve carried. They climbed onto their bikes, the familiar routines offering a comforting balm. The rhythmic turn of the pedals grounded him, propelling them forward into the quickening afternoon. As they rode through the winding trails, Steve couldn't help but contemplate the crossroads he found himself at. Confrontation loomed like a thundercloud in the distance, ready to unleash its fury. He needed to prepare, to equip himself for whatever truth awaited him. The image of that man, the one who haunted his past, was vivid, a whisper at the back of his mind urging him to take action. "Dad, is something bothering you?" Jake asked innocently, breaking the rhythm of thoughts swirling in his mind. "No, buddy. Just deep in thought," Steve replied, forcing a smile. Vulnerability wasn't something he wanted to burden Jake with yet. He would shield him from the storm brewing inside. Yet, that very shield felt increasingly tenuous. They paused at a small clearing, the landscape stretched out before them, an inviting panorama. As they caught their breath, Steve watched Jake closely. This boy, so unguarded and joyous, represented the hope of future resolve. Perhaps, amidst the uncertainties, was also a chance for reflection and discovery. "Jake," he started, wanting to explore an uncharted territory. "What do you think makes someone brave?" Jake pondered, his brow scrunching in concentration. "Maybe it's facing the scary stuff? Like when you have to talk to someone even when you're scared of what they'll say?" Steve's heart sank slightly, but also swelled with pride. "Exactly. You're right. It takes bravery to confront what scares us, especially when it's with the people we love." A moment passed where silence enveloped them, filled only with the soft rustling of leaves and the distant chirp of birds. It struck Steve then this wasn't just about him facing his past. It was also about teaching Jake the importance of confronting his own fears. If he was going to teach his son how to ride through life courageously, he needed to model that behavior first. Jake, he continued, carefully framing his thoughts. There's someone I need to talk to, and it's not going to be easy. But I think it's necessary for us. For me to really be the dad you deserve. Excitement flickered in Jake's eyes. Can I come with you? I want to help you be brave. Steve chuckled lightly, appreciating the sincerity in his son's response. It wasn't just a moment of support, it was a commitment to their shared journey. I appreciate that, but this one is something I need to do alone. Just know, carrying this weight matters and facing it is a part of our family story now, even yours someday. With that understanding, they finished their ride, the energy of adventure charging through the day. But as they returned home, the lingering apprehension about the upcoming confrontation still gnawed at him, the unknown shapes that pressed closer, whispering doubts into his mind. Later that night, back at home, Steve found himself pacing his living room. The walls echoed memories, the stark contrast of laughter fading into silence. He tried to prepare himself mentally for the confrontation ahead, even as his heart raced at the thought of unearthing unresolved feelings and potential heartbreak. What did the man from his past truly want, and how might their meeting unravel everything Steve had built? Would he emerge victorious, or would it serve as a reminder of his flaws and failures? As he sat in the stillness, a decision began to crystallize within him. He had to wield his own narrative, to shape the man he wanted to become, not just for himself but for Jake. Tomorrow. He whispered, gathering courage in the quiet of the night. Tomorrow, I face him. Clenching his fists, he felt ready, or at least as ready as he could be. But a single thought pierced through the calm. What if confronting his past unearthed more than he was prepared to handle? Would the truth bind their story together, or would it tear through the fragile fabric he was trying to weave? The weight of uncertainty settled over him. Tomorrow would be the day everything changed. The morning sunshine streamed through the window, illuminating the remnants of yesterday's turmoil in Steve's mind. Today was the day he would confront the man from his past. With the memories swirling, he stood at the precipice of a choice, determined to face his fears head-on. As he prepared, Steve felt a quiet determination coalescing within him. He was tired of being defined by failures, tired of carrying the burden of isolation. Today wouldn't just be about confronting a ghost, but also about solidifying a new beginning for both himself and Jake. He glanced over to the living room where Jake was finishing breakfast, his laughter piercing through the remnants of self-doubt that had lingered. The buoyancy in his son's spirit reminded Steve of what lay ahead for them, the opportunity to reshape their story. "Dad, you look like you're about to face a dragon or something," Jake teased, youthful exuberance radiating from him. Steve chuckled, the tension easing slightly from his shoulders. "A dragon, huh? Maybe a small one, but I think it's just going to be a conversation. Can I come?" Jake's eyes shone with eagerness. Steve paused, contemplating. "No, buddy. This is something I need to do alone. But I promise to tell you all about it afterward." He leaned down to ruffle Jake's hair, feeling an overwhelming wave of gratitude wash over him. Their shared journey was built on courage now. With Jake's hopeful smile etched in his mind, Steve steeled himself, venturing out into the crisp morning air. The day felt alive with potential, each step heavy with purpose. He approached the small diner where the man awaited, an unassuming place where past and present could converge. As he stepped inside, a familiar figure sat alone at the far corner table. His mouth was set in a grim line, but his presence commanded attention. Steve felt a surge of conflicting emotions: anger, regret, but also a fiercely burning resolve to confront the one person who could provide clarity. "Steve," the man acknowledged, an edge of surprise slicing through his voice. "David," Steve replied, forcing the name through clenched teeth. "We need to talk." With palpable tension, the conversation unfolded. Steve spoke of his fears, sharing anecdotes from their past that now felt distant but were profoundly relevant. "You know that your leave hurt me, hurt so many of us. I stopped sharing who I was with those I cared about because I thought I could do it alone. I thought that was strength. The air thickened, David's gaze unwavering. I didn't mean to disappear. I was scared too. But I see now we missed so many opportunities, and I know I need to take responsibility for that. Those words struck a chord within Steve. Responsibility. Honesty. Perhaps this conversation was the unlocking mechanism for both of them to acknowledge their shared failures and how they had neglected their potential for connection. Is that it, then? Steve's voice trembled. After all these years, we come to a simple apology? The shift in his tone demanded more than just remorse, it needed resolution. David's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of his past hanging in the air. I've learned that walking away was cowardly. I must face all that I left unaddressed. And I want to learn from that now. The exchange sparked something in Steve's fierce clarity. The dialogue wasn't just about accusations, it was a revelation of understanding and a step toward rebuilding what had been lost. Let us not just be ghosts of each other's past, Steve said, his voice stronger now. Let us create a future that means we don't continuously run away from each other. It was a proposal, but also a conviction. The change they both needed was rooted in accountability. When they finally finished their talk, a sense of relief washed over Steve. He didn't feel completely free yet, but he had taken the first giant step toward confronting his layered past and mending his relationship with Jake. As he exited the diner, sunlight blazed through the glass, flooding him with the warmth of possibility. That conversation had been a turning point not just with David, but within himself. He felt lighter, more open to the rediscovery of himself and his son. Returning home, Jake rushed to greet him, anticipation gleaming in his eyes like a summer day. How did it go? Better than I expected, Steve responded, kneeling down to meet Jake's gaze directly. And there's something I want to share with you. It's about being honest, and why it matters so much. They settled into the familiar couch, ready for a deeper exchange of truths. As Steve recounted the conversation, his voice unwavering but reflective, Jake listened with intent. The narrative of confrontation transformed into a lesson about vulnerability, that honesty and openness are integral to the strength of their relationship. Steve's heart swelled with pride, recognizing the significant strides he had taken, no longer just a mechanic in a garage but a father facing his fears for the sake of his son. He realized they were both on the same journey, learning to ride together through the complicated terrain of life. In that moment, as laughter built bridges over shared fears, Steve knew something profound had changed within him. He was no longer a man haunted by his failures but rather one who embraced them to fuel a brighter future alongside Jake. Their connection felt unbreakable, strengthened not just by shared experiences but also by the courage to confront their truths. Together, they had entered a new chapter in their lives, one filled with resilience, honesty, and the promise of growth. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the dawn of a robust bond, the promise of transformation, the legacy they would no longer run from, but ride toward together. In that illuminating moment, with laughter echoing through their home, Steve found the reassurance he craved. They were no longer just a reflection of the past but architects of their future, and he felt genuinely, unequivocally free. Now, it's your turn to embark on your journey of connection and growth. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others find their path through these vital narratives. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice is essential in this community. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the word. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.